All right, welcome. I'm so happy to have you joining me today, Danielle.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So I'd love to start with you telling our listeners just a little bit about you and what you do in the world.
Yeah, so my name is Danielle Searancke. I'm also known as the Squamish Medium. And for the past 11 years, I have been unfolding in the art of mediumship, took a very keen interest in the nuances of why spirit communication is the way that it is. And through that, tedious self discovery, I learned how to break down mediumship in a very practical and tangible way. So I am more known now internationally as being a mediumship teacher and mentor, but I still do love practicing the art of mediumship. I still offer readings. I started spirit school 7 years ago, which is my expression of mentorship when it comes to teaching people about spiritual development and mediumship development. So yeah, that's what I do in the world. I have two little babies who are 7 and 10. My abilities came out after their birth. And so I really do balance that world of, being a mom half of my life and being a medium the other half of my life. So that's a little bit about me.
Yes, I've seen you do that so well. And I can attest to, I did your mediumship course, which was formerly called the initiation. And so I did that actually last year. And then I was a member of your spirit school community for the last year. And it's just such a beautiful and supportive, incredibly helpful. There's so many trainings that are available in there, and you are a very gifted teacher. I have to tell you that, in addition to being a very gifted medium.
I really appreciate that. I love teaching. In high school, I wanted to be a teacher. I just couldn't get to university. I couldn't afford it. And so I never got to go to university and I ended up working with race cars after high school. But I find it very synchronistic that I did end up being a teacher, just in a very different way.
Yep, yep. It's a good thing that you didn't end up going down that path in some respects, right? That it all unfolded the way it was meant to.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think you're such a good example of, a very gradual step by step form of success. So it wasn't that you just were like, oh my goodness, I am now Tyler Henry and I am offering, mediumship on TV, although you are offering mediumship on TV now. It was a very gradual thing. And you spent many years in um, private development courses, not even offering mediumship to the world. So I would love for you to just speak to that gradual unfolding, because I think it's so easy to look at you now and see all the success that you have and think that it was overnight.
I've never been asked that on a podcast. So I really appreciate you touching on that because it's something I really try to share with my students so that they don't have like this pressure that they have somewhere to be when we have our whole lives to do this work. It's not the type of work you retire from. You can walk away from it whenever you feel like, but it is something that I hope people will consider doing for their whole lives. And I've always had that longevity in my mind. A lot of the mentors that I have looked up to were in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And so I had a really good example of what it looked like to do this for the long term. And I'm really grateful for that. I studied under Mavis Patilla for many years. She was in her 80s. She just passed away a year ago. And she really is a good example for me of somebody who you can take your time, you can do this forever. So I never really felt rushed in my practice. And the first mediumship connection I ever made was with a mother who lost a son. And I experienced probably the most intense grief and need for mediumship in that first connection. And I have to say that that is what made me choose a slow and steady path because I was met with this grief that I had no understanding of. And I felt very responsible in that moment. And so that sense of responsibility really was for me. I had a prayer to myself after I left that session on the way home. And I said to Spirit, I was like, I understand the need in this work, and I'm going to understand this work deeply and intensely before I consider putting myself out there to be of service, because that level of grief also kind of scared me. I realized, working with race cars before, I didn't have all that natural space holding tendencies. And that's something I also had to develop into, learn how to hold space for people in grief. That's a skill in itself that many mediumship courses don't even touch on. And they're just so worried about spirit communication. But I'm like, we're working with humans. So I had that, desire to understand how to support humans as well as how to, communicate effectively with the spirit world. So I really took my time in understanding, how to hold space, trauma informed care, as well as refining my own experience with mediumship, because it was very different for me than how it worked for my mentors, who were very clairvoyant and very clairaudient. And I'm a very clairsentient and cognizant medium. And no one really talked about the sentient experience. So it was really it was like a choose your own adventure journey. And I just enjoyed the development path so much that I didn't feel a lot of pressure to put myself out there, put up a website, or leave my job. So I just really chose a slow and steady path. And that's how it has been my whole time. And the progression you see has been purely based off of invitations. I have really pursued nothing. I have said yes to everything.
Yeah, I do, in watching, someone told me about your podcast, and you have this incredible podcast called Spirit School. It's one of my very favorites. You're a very gifted podcaster. And I started listening to you, and then I joined your mediumship course, and then I joined your membership as well. And I saw firsthand how much you just go with the flow. Like, you plan, but you also are very flexible in that planning, and you're very open to whatever comes your way. You're not a controlling, it must be this way. You just allow the experiences to unfold, and that has led to, this beautiful life that you live now.
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky. I feel very lucky. And I am a Virgo sun, so I am very hyper controlling. And I am a perfectionist. And I healed a lot of that through my teaching, because you can get really energy sick doing readings, but you can also get energy sick over, thinking about what you think people need or trying to meet everyone's need. And the teaching path in itself was its own development journey. And I realized that my magic is actually in responsive spaces. And you really don't know what you don't know until somebody asks you. And so I chose to teach in a responsive way that meets people where they're at, because there is no one size fits all approach to mediumship. Nothing anyone else has ever taught me has worked for me necessarily like it works for them. So I kind of wanted to create spaces where people can experiment, see how it works for you. This is how it works for me. This is how I've seen it work for other people, but you won't know how it works for you until you try it. So my whole premise behind my teaching is like, let's create a safe environment for you to like fall on your face, pick yourself back up, learn, continue on. And to me, that's the most effective way that for me to learn. And so that's how I teach. And it seems to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, I am a clinical psychologist, and so I was very skilled at holding space for people. Like, grief was, that's something I'm skilled at handling, but I was really afraid to do readings. I didn't know what would happen. And so I loved in your membership that we could do practice readings on each other. It just took the pressure off. It helped me to recognize what my style was. And I think that's such an important aspect of mediumship development.
Yeah, it is everything in mediumship development, because the truth is, you can listen to every podcast, you can watch every lecture from every amazing teacher, you can read every single book, and until you're in the arena, none of it will make sense. None
Mhm.
of it. The learning is in the field, and it's only through doing that you actually develop your mediumship. So everything I do has community at its core. I'm a big in my 11th house, like in community. I just naturally can make really amazing community spaces. And so, like in the membership, people can sign up for as many practice readings as they want every single week. And we organize all of that for you. And then we also have our wider spirit school community who, sit voluntarily for developing light workers as public sitters. So like there's lots of places to kind of stretch yourself, because it's also actually, you'd be surprised, but it's harder to read for other mediums and other developing students than it is to read for people who have an actual need for mediumship. So if you can thrive in a practice setting, you're going to soar out there in the public, and people
Yes.
think it's opposite.
I've noticed that to be true because, in me coming in for a mediumship reading, I didn't have a strong need for mediumship. So I was a little bit harder to read.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, whereas if someone comes in with that intention and that desire, I think that really stirs up the energy of spirit.
Yeah, the need of mediumship is that sticky energy. It's actually it's sticky, it's palpable. And so the greater the need, the easier it is for readers to work. Though I will say some people, unless they do that personal development work, that need could freak them out as well, right? So there's a lot of like, personal development that is associated with mediumship development that I think we really underestimate. It's like,
Yes.
I would say it's like 80-20.
Yeah.
80-20. I mean, spirit communication, we are spirits. It's a natural language. It's a natural way of communicating that is ingrained in our soul. It's not that hard to remember that, but learning how to work with other humans who have had, we've all had experiences leading up until that time, that could be a little bit trickier. And I think not everyone who's an efficient and effective medium effectively works with public.
I would say that's probably a big reason why people end up not pursuing the career long term, because it is a very challenging personal journey as well. And it can bring up a lot of your own personal issues if you haven't dealt with them.
100%. I wrote one page of a book. I'm not a reader myself, so I'm like, why am I writing a book? But I wrote one page. I wrote one page, and on this one page, I really did note. I said, my healing journey was actually through mediumship development. It was mediumship development that I healed so many aspects of my human, because I think the things that we walk around with that we're wounded by, we become so accustomed to walking with, and they don't seem like we need to fix them because we're used to walking with them. But then we do something new, like mediumship development, and everything comes to the surface in a really new way. We have no choice but to face it and to kind of deal with it. And so a lot of people are not ready for that level of work as
Mhm.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it might just not be now. And so I've seen a lot of people walk away because it is a lot of looking at yourself, and it's a lot of dancing with the ego, and it's not easy work. It's not an easy path, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I absolutely, I don't do a lot of mediumship itself. It's funny that I wanted to join your course because I don't have a strong desire to do mediumship. And I kept saying to myself, why am I joining this class? I don't actually want to be a medium, but I did a lot of, channeling and psychic readings. And, but for whatever reason, I felt drawn to your work. And I have found that it really digs at whatever you haven't healed and brings that up to the surface. And for me, I love that process. Anything that needs to be worked on, I am game and excited to do so. And I think that's one of the fun aspects of this type of work.
100%. And as a therapist, that makes sense. And, a lot of therapists, naturopaths, doctors are really drawn to working with me because there's a desire to learn to meet the need of somebody as well. And I think that that's what mediumship training also does. It's like we're here to cut through in 30 minutes what could take you years in therapy
Mhm.
to uncover. And, a couple years ago, I was interviewed by the University of British Columbia's psychology department because they were wondering about the effectiveness of, working through grief through mediumship versus clinical therapy sessions. And, my answer to them was, my hope and our intention is with mediumship that somebody would only need to see us once and that's it. And then with therapy, it's like ongoing support for like the things that come up, because we really do have usually, I've been booked for and busy for many years. So you can't get in more than once, usually in a couple years with me. So you don't have that ability to come back. So we really only have a short amount of time to like cut through and like see what they want us to see that will bring the biggest need for healing. And so that ability to meet a need benefits doctors, it benefits psychiatrists. And I think that that's where a lot of people really ask me for that mentorship, teach me to meet that need.
So speaking of mentorship, so you're a medium, you're also a teacher, and you're also a mentor. And I also do spiritual mentorship, and I love the energy of mentoring people, which is different from teaching, it's different from coaching, it's different from therapy. So I'm curious about your feelings around what is mentorship? How is it different, and how does it help a developing medium?
Yeah. So, if I were, I can't define the difference between all those different terminologies, but it is a very different energetic output. And it is also a very different energetic input as well for me. It's easier in some ways, but it's harder in some ways. It's like with readings, you're holding space for 45 minutes. And with mentorship, there's a cord and there's a energetic connection, and we're holding space continuously for somebody more. So in other ways, it actually takes up more energy to hold people in that mentorship capacity. But why I'm so passionate about mentorship is because the spirit world has told me, like through spirit school, the old days of mediumship was really like you're gifted, you're chosen, and there's very few mediums kind of like doing this work on a platform, but there's more people who need mediumship now. And skepticism has really kind of subsided. So I see myself through my mentorship as building capacity for the spirit world to work through. I'm building capacity for them to have more people to work through, because mediumship can benefit anyone and everyone, because we all lose someone. So I'm very passionate about building ethical and confident mediums that are also have humility, and they understand the responsibility of this work. And so I only mentor people who see themselves in me. And I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about that, because I can't mentor everyone. In fact, one of the questions to work for me, I want to know what spiritual teachers you're drawn to, because I'll get a sense right off of that if like I'm your vibe or not, right? Like if you
Right.
love Teal Swan, I'm probably not your vibe. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, very
you love
different
Joe
energy.
Rogan, I'm probably not your teacher. You know what I mean? Like in truth. So that's very telling for me. And so a lot of people like the words that I pick, or the way that I hold space for people. And that's what they want to learn. That's all I can teach you, because I teach through an experiential lens.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a framework. I don't have a 1, 2, 3 process. I don't think that exists in this space. So I love teaching through my lived experiences, and that really takes pressure off of having to like know everything. I don't know everything, but I have experienced a lot in 11 years. And I think that what I needed when I was younger that I never received was a teacher to say, bad readings happen. Not everyone's going to love you, and you're going to fall on your face a lot, and you're going to be perfectly fine. No one talked about that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so when I started my podcast, I'm like, this is what I'm going to talk about, because this would have made me probably more confident earlier on than fumbling myself. Like, I think this happens to everyone. And so for me, mentorship is really important, because I think that this path can be very lonely and isolating. And there's a lot of stigma around allowing yourself to be seen as human, even though like you're a spiritual mentor. And I try to like really break that down and like normalize that. And I think that, I don't want people to be lonely on this path, because I was so lonely. And even to this day, it's quite lonely for me. Not a lot of people are willing to be vulnerable or match me in that vulnerability when it comes to like their practices and stuff. And so I'm just an open book. I'm like, I'll tell you guys anything, what works, what doesn't. And and I love that. And I feel like I walk alongside my friends. I really do. And I don't know if that's healthy
I think it's totally
mentally, but
fine.
I literally, I'm like, because there are some definite spaces who could position that as being like, manipulative even, right? But I really do feel that I'm walking alongside my friends, and I want them to succeed, and they can feel that I want them to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed when I was younger, and I never forgot. So my business and my practice is continuously developing the things I wish I had had.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts about what you just said. One is, with mentorship, especially in this type of work, you can learn from, you have a lot of teachings in your membership of, how to do various things, right? And it's not all like, oh, step one, connect with spirit, step two, but it's, there is some how to. However, the real gift in this kind of work is in the art of it, and that's something that you can't teach without a response from someone, right? And that's where mentorship, someone will come in and be like, here's what happened. And then you can explore it. And you can't really do that from a teaching perspective as much. And I think there's great power in that sort of work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the most fulfilling part of my work is the mentorship. And again, I just kind of like clairvoyantly can see like the ripple effect. You know what I mean? It's like developing one reader that can work with hundreds of people actually creates a bigger ripple effect than doing like one reading every day. You know what I mean? It just creates a bigger ripple effect. And I do both now. I couldn't do both for a long time. I was like, I had to pick a mentorship season and I had to pick a reading season. It was really hard for me to bounce between the energy input and output. But now I've built up enough capacity that I can do readings in the morning and mentorship in the afternoon. But it is a capacity game. We are human and we can't do everything. And so that's part of the beauty of the slow and steady path as well, has been this like experiment around it and staying well during it, and people are watching me, so the experimenting is a lot of fun.
You seem like someone that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but might fall into the tendency to work too much and then feel the impact of that on yourself personally. Is that something that you've struggled with?
Can you say that one more time? It cut out, sorry.
Oh, just that you seem like someone who has struggled a bit with a tendency to work too much and then the
Mhm.
impact of that on you personally.
Yeah, I have a fierce work ethic. And I worked this hard in corporate, believe it or not. Like they were trying to fast track me to C-level because, we did these big 5 assessments and it turned out it was like the highest worrier in the organization. Like I worried more than the CEO. They're like, Danielle's your person. You need Danielle. And, I was 9 years old when I got my first job and I would walk into stores. How can I earn money? I would bang on people's doors. What can I do for you? I would be like returning bottles or washing cars or weeding. And, teachers strike. I was on the picket line selling juice boxes. And like, I've always been an entrepreneur and I've always had this drive. I was born with it. You know what I mean? And so working for me is very joyful. It's where I feel the most sense of purpose, and it is a tough balance because I could work nonstop. And, even when we had babies, I had a government job that I got a year maternity leave, and there was an option to give that to my husband in Canada, right? Like I could hand that over to my husband, and I actually thought about it. Can you believe that? Like, I was so sad to like leave work for a
Yeah.
year because I loved working. And so that work ethic you see is everywhere. Again, I work this hard for other people as I do myself. And so I've always had it, and it is really hard to kind of scale back. And, trauma is definitely a big motivator. And, growing up with nothing definitely showed me I'm going to have to work for the things that I need. And I've just always wanted better for myself than what I saw kind of growing up for our family. And so that was a big motivator for me. And it is hard to turn off, and it is hard to, focus on other areas of my life. But that's also the art of life,
Mhm.
right? It's like it takes effort. So if I'm willing to put this much effort into my mediumship development, and I'm not willing to put that much effort into learning how to find joy through motherhood, then I'm out of balance. And so I really do try to carry that effort to all the different areas of my life. If it fills me up, you know what I mean? I'm a little bit selfish like that. I really do avoid things that I don't love to do. Um, but yeah, it's definitely hard. There's downsides to it. I have anxiety because I'm always worried about things. I'm not embodied all the time because I'm always up and out here, like with spirit. And so, I have like um, digestion stuff, like solar plexus stuff. So it does definitely have its own physical toll, all this working, but it does also bring me a lot of joy. And I will tell you, I do have a good balance. Like, as much as I say that, I work, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, 3 weeks a month, and I take an entire month off a year. So I'm technically taking 3 months off a year. So I do have balance. I do take care of myself. But I also have a lot of fun doing it. And I don't do anything I don't have fun doing. So yeah, I don't know
That's
if you have any
beautiful.
questions
Three
beyond that.
hours a
So
day is very, you must be extremely productive in those 3 hours.
I am. I mean, even when I was in corporate, they let me work 4 days a week and I got paid for 5 because they said you can get done in one day what most people get done in 2 weeks. And I didn't realize I was actually exercising my claircognizance. I didn't understand that. Like, they would put me in like this room with these government officials and they would like announce, like, we're doing like a province wide indigenous initiative to get everybody moving. And I knew within 5 seconds how that would work and how much money I would need. And they would task me with it and I would launch it within a month and it would plan out exactly. And I didn't realize I was actually using my claircognizance in corporate that I use in my mediumship. So like when I walked into spirit school, when I walked into the space and I saw it and I knew exactly how much it was going to cost. I knew exactly how I was going to get the money. I knew who the contractor was going to be. And it worked out exactly how I saw it. So it doesn't take a lot of efforting for me in this space. I have that lucky girl energy when it comes to business and money for some reason. I struggle with like health.
Yeah, I've
Health is my
noticed your
Achilles
health
heel.
has been, yeah, more of a challenge for you. And I guess my psychologist brain just went to, okay, she works a lot. I wonder if she's giving her body enough rest, right? Which
No,
may or may not be the factor, but that's where my head goes.
no, I hate needles, but like I go to acupuncture just because it forces me to sit still. It's like I will not sit still, but when I'm on the acupuncture table, I'm like, I'm not moving. So it's like I do things like that so that I can get that kind of stillness, but that's what it takes
Yeah.
for me. I'm just a very highly driven, motivated, and I have a lot of grit. I
Yeah.
just keep going. I just keep
Yeah.
going and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. My husband used to joke that I paid for acupuncture just so I could go have a nap because I always fell asleep
Yes.
on the table. I was like,
Yeah.
you might be onto something there.
100%. I'm not going anywhere with that. So, yeah, it's a busy mind. I mean, there's downsides to it, of course, but I do have a trainer now and I work out with her twice a week and this year is very different from years prior. Like the initiation that you took, I ran it 10 times. We had 60 plus people every single time. It was a really big program. I loved running it and I am going to run it again eventually, but this year because last year was such a big year building a school, hosting my first retreat, filming a TV pilot, like having 3 international teachers come here to teach. Like it was just a crazy year. And I totally forgot to book time off. And so I just forgot. I literally like had amnesia that like people need some rest time. So this year is very, very different. And, I put the initiation on pause for a year. I'm doing smaller masterminds that are much more intimate and very fulfilling for me. And so like I'm good at, assessing myself before a full crumble and then making shifts. I'm not afraid to make shifts. I'm not afraid to change things. So that also gives a lot of my light working students a lot of permission to shift and evolve and change as well. So they're watching me and, you know, I'm very transparent about it all and trying to break down any romantic illusion around what I do. It's just, it takes grit. That's what I'll
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very impressed by how you manage it all. Um, one thing I notice about you is one of the reasons why I'm drawn to your work and your energy is you're very not ego driven, which is often hard to accomplish for people, especially as they grow. Like you've grown to a very high level of success, and you have a very like humble, generous approach to your work and your life. And I know that that has not always been what you have received back. Like you've spoken about, being on podcast episodes with people and, the just not the reciprocity that has, what you're giving out, you're not always receiving back. And I'm just curious how you've been able to just kind of maintain that, true you, the soul level you of, um, that generosity and that loving heart that, I think anyone who follows you can see.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I hate saying like, I don't have an ego, but like truth, there's a downside to this. I don't see myself as clearly as you all see me. There is a truth to that. Like I don't think that there's very much unique about me that isn't unique in other people. And I do not see myself that clearly. So, in saying that, I have a little bit of like this inner mean girl who keeps me really humble too, that I'm trying to like work with as well. So, just being really transparent about that. I have not changed one bit since I started this. And that's something that people who have listened to my podcast can attest to. People who have been in my membership for 5 years can attest to. I don't know why that is, but will tell you, like, as a death doula, I sit with people who are dying all the time, and there's nothing that keeps you more grounded than sitting with people who are about to transition out of here. And I also just want to say that I think that is something that has kept me very humble as well, is just really realizing how sensitive life is, because you can get really kind of up and out there when you're like talking to the heavens and like everything's like love and light and all that stuff. And I do like the duality of working with people who are in that transition progress and that process. It's very sobering, it's very humbling, and it's something that really keeps me grounded. And when I see people whose egos are taking away, and I've said this to even a few students, go sit with someone who's dying, go volunteer at a hospice. Like, if you want to be brought down to earth and what we're doing here, go sit with other humans in this space and see how sensitive life actually really is. And that keeps me very humble as well. And the fact, like, honestly, um, it's like, I don't see any of this being for me. I didn't name Spirit School after me. I think that this is for other people. It's not just for me. It's a platform, it's a space for other people to grow and thrive. And I've always just been really focused on that. And there was like a fourth thing I wanted to say around this, is in mediumship, it's not perfect. And anyone who tells you that a reading is 100% or they get every name, they get like every detail, is absolutely bullshitting themselves. And so I think anyone who does this work enough knows that the imperfection of mediumship should be humbling in itself.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect science, and no reading is going to be 100% accurate. And I think that keeps us humble as well. And I think that is actually a divine reason why mediumship is not 100% accurate, is to keep us humble. And some people don't like that humility, and that's why a lot of people don't sustain the path as well. So there's a lot to keep you humble if you can see it. And I see it.
Yes. I really appreciate your perspective on money. And I know last year you taught a series on, was it called The Trauma of Money?
No, I took the trauma of money, which
Oh,
is a
you
program I highly recommend, but it was called Heal That Shit Money.
heal that shit. That's what it was. Right. So I'm just curious about kind of if you could sort of summarize your perspective about money. Like, I feel like you have a very healthy relationship with money. And we can't say that about all people.
Oh, I
I think
know.
you've done a lot of healing in that area. And so I'd love to hear your perspective about that.
Yeah. Summarizing's hard for me. I'm a long form content creator and I'm a
Hey,
storyteller.
go to town.
So there's no like 90-second synopsis with me, unfortunately, which is why you'll never see a reel from me. I'm like, I can't summarize this in 90 seconds. I'm like, come to my podcast. I grew up in food scarcity, eating at churches, being like in the school programs. Like, the relationship I have with money is very intergenerational. I also come from residential school survivors that grew up in indigenous communities. Like, the money was not abundant around me. So I've never placed a high importance on money. I never expected to have like a lot of money. I just knew that if I wanted shoes, if I wanted things that I like, I had to get it myself. That much I knew, but I've never had a drive or desire to be like wealthy. Owning a home was never in a goal, but I married somebody who sold a race car and wanted to use that money to buy a house. And that's how we got into the real estate market. So for me, though I've never had like more than enough, I've always had enough. You know what I mean? And so that kind of has been my perspective of money growing up. It was actually when I started to get a lot more money that I started to recognize my wounds. I never wanted to keep any of it. I wanted to give it all away. I still always try to find ways to like give all my money away. I make a lot through Spirit School. I don't want to say how much, but we are getting close to 7-figure a year here. It's like a big, big, big deal. But I still personally take a wage. And it's the same wage that I used to make in corporate. And I reinvest the rest into hiring people or contractors or giving my students like opportunities or building this school, which actually I was worried, felt like an egoic venture where I was like, oh God, I had to do really a lot lot of soul searching and checking in with that. So when I quit corporate to come into entrepreneurship, I'm the first entrepreneur in my whole family and my whole friend group. So there wasn't a whole lot of people to look up to in this regard. And I ended up in, some kind of sketchy business coaching spaces where people were like telling me to charge my worth and then I got really stuck in that. And I saw a lot of toxic and, if you ask me, harmful advice and information out there when it came to spiritual entrepreneurship and business and how people really put money on a pedestal. And so I kind of got curious about the social justice part about money. And so I started kind of like being immersed in that area and finding so many resistances to it and finding it very empty. Not a whole lot of substance or like heart in it. But I had to see that, because what it did was it made me want to be more kind, more generous, more accessible. Like for the initiation, I never raised the price of it in 10 rounds. And business advice says you have to increase it because blah, 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 blah. I was like, no, I'm actually going to make it. I did pay what you can the last 2 rounds, and I still made the same amount of money doing pay what you can. And so I wanted to kind of show people that you can have accessible pricing and you can have accessible models that are actually a lot more expensive to have in your business and still be abundant and still be successful. So I started looking at the history of money, decolonizing my relationship to money, consciously deciding to make sure that Spirit School was not a profit-centered business, experimenting with multiple currencies, payment plans that were penalty-free. I took that trauma of money program, which talked about, the psychology of money. So they took it from that psychological lens. So what I created with Heal That Shit Money was, here I am as a spiritual entrepreneur. I'm a spiritual teacher and a mentor, but I wanted to present, you know, what money is to society in a very practical and tangible way to kind of balance the people out there who are like, you just have to wish it hard enough to and think about it enough to attract it, which maybe that works for some people. I don't know. It doesn't work for me. And I don't like thinking about money all the time. So I kind of wanted to create something that like brought some balance to it. But I highly recommend the Trauma of Money program to anyone. A woman in BC actually created it, but a lot of social justice leaders from the States help run it. And even how she runs that is actually quite incredible. I did the whole workbook, decolonizing wealth, decolonizing my relationship to wealth. And then just kind of doing that assessment work, like what is enough for me? What is enough for Spirit School? And then that really gave me permission to scale back this year, where all the pressure of the outer world is like, scale up, scale up, scale up. And, I think scaling is actually overrated. I'm like, I actually want to live a life. So this year I did a big scale back and it's worked out fine too. It's like, you're making enough, you know what I mean? And so it's just a big experiment, and it's looking at, I don't have to take on how my parents thought and experienced money. I don't have to take on the things that I saw. I got to kind of choose when I wanted my experience to be. And yeah, it's, money is just something that, some people a long time ago said this is the currency of value for us, and that's all it is. And so that's what I work with. If it was food that we were exchanging for, I would probably see it the bit same. I don't need 10 million steaks. You know what I mean? It's like I need like 30 for the next 30 days. And that's how I see money as well. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to amass like huge wealth, and I don't need it. And if I got it, I'd probably give it all away anyways, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you'd be,
But I've had to have that balance.
if you were Jeff Bezos, ex-wife, she's, been quite a philanthropist and giving away all her money. And I think she's someone to look up to for sure. I think you're a real trailblazer in this area. And, you're going against what the traditional teachings are around money. And I love that you've focused on like deconditioning all of those beliefs that they're so deeply ingrained in our culture that it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's not. Well, even this past year, I made a move because I'm Canadian and I live in Canada, and most of my clients are in the States. And so for years I was charging in Canadian dollars because I live in Canada, but it was really hard to explain to people in America what Canadian money was. And I would spend like hours, like every single launch, trying to explain Canadian money, like what a currency exchange rate would, like it was kind of wild. So I decided for effort of ease, because I hate administration. It's one thing that I'm like, no emails, like no administration, no paperwork, don't want it. Uh, so for ease of administration, I decided to go to US dollars because 90% of my clients are in the States. And so, that did benefit me. But originally I was going to make the initiation 1111. So I made it 888 because that kind of exchanges to 1111 Canadian, right? So that's kind of how I think in my mind. And so what happened was that 888 does really become inaccessible for Canadians because that is like a lot of money. So last year I experimented with an equal investment model. So people who came into my masterminds, depending on your mailing address, because I mail everyone gifts and kits and stuff like that, that's the exchange rate that you pay in. So people are paying 555 Canadian or 555 US. And so I started doing this equal investment model, which cost me a lot to run, but it's ethical, it's doable.
Yeah.
So why not? Why not?
Oh,
And the amount of Canadians that came to me saying thank you was,
absolutely. Like we have to pay so much more. I'm finding it funny that the Americans were protesting about this, yet they're paying less. But
well, they
yes,
just didn't understand. Like they would show me their credit card statements and like walk me through this. I'm like, I know. It is what it is because I mean, the American dollar is the center of the universal like money exchange. So everyone understands the US dollar. So that's an argument for people to go into USD. But
mhm.
and I did that for years and it was great and I loved it. But I was just like, I wonder if, and that's all the business decisions I make. I'm like, I wonder what would happen. I wonder if, and that's how I do things. And it's worked out wonderfully. It takes two acuity accounts, so I'm paying double for two different acuity accounts to be able to do this. And my poor assistant, Andrea, she's full-time now, but I love her so much. She runs my whole business for me, but she's like in PayPal doing custom links for everyone. Cause I also did a sliding scale for my masterminds where I had 3 different payment options. You can pick how much you want to pay. And so I had one that was supported. I had one that was equal. And then I had one that was karma. And the people don't know yet who picked karma, but they're going to get something after that's going to be very karmic for them. So it's been a lot of fun. And this is what I love about spiritual entrepreneurship because I don't have to work within the frame of what society says I have to do. I have to exist within capitalism. I'm not a capitalist, but I am because I live within the framework of it. But can I be successful doing something totally different? 100%. And so I love the concept of flourishingism, which is what I talk about in the Heal That Shit Money course. It's like we don't have to pick socialism or communism or capitalism. It's like we could pick something totally new. And that's what I'm trying to do. I have a concept in my heart called flourishingism where everyone can flourish. Why not? There's enough wealth in this world. So that's what I'm trying to demonstrate through my business.
Oh, I love that. And it's new and it's ancient. It's the way that we used to live, and everything was very smooth and reciprocal in those days.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we've lost that reciprocity because capitalism has us fighting for the dollar in the middle of the table, thinking that that's all there is. And so, that's how, I don't want to get into colonization, but I won't get into that work, but I'm just saying, because that's the world I used to always work in. And I'm an indigenous woman, so I see the world through that lens. Right. So, we don't have to work within that framework if we don't want to. So,
Yeah.
but if you do decide to work for corporate, then you have to, right? Like
There's a certain amount of we have to live in the world, but
yeah.
you are just giving such beautiful examples of how you're living in the world and doing your thing and demonstrating to everyone how it can be so successful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. For
Mhm.
bringing that up because yeah, I don't get to talk about this very much.
Yeah, I love it. It was very inspiring to me. I would love to have you speak on your indigenous roots and how they inform your spiritual practice.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a trickier one for me to answer because the history of my family, of my line, is actually kind of sad. as our most indigenous lines. Like, you won't meet an indigenous person in Canada or America that has not been impacted by either Indian hospitals or residential schools. And my grandmother was not born, but she was taken to a residential school when she was 3. And then, when she was at residential school, the Hudson Bay Company shut down her community and told everyone to get off the land and go find new homes. So by the time she aged out of residential school, she had nowhere to return to. And that's the case with my family. And so we're from York Factory, Manitoba, which is the first colonized community in Canada. And there's going to be, a lot of reparation coming from the government because of that any day now. And so that's been kind of a different turn of events. So my family is one that is forced into being reconnecting Indigenous people because we didn't get to grow up in our culture. My dad was raised in the 60s scoop, so my grandmother had to hide him, and she had to tell my dad to deny that he was Indigenous and say that he was anything but, like, you're Asian, you're Spanish, you're anything but, or he would have been taken away. So a lot of my family history up until my line has been denying being Indigenous. Now, I was born with this, because I'm mixed, I'm half, but I was born declaring like I am First Nations. I literally came out of the womb with it. I had a close connection with my grandmother who was from the community. And like my parents even have like this picture in grade 3. We had to draw flags of our nationality, and I drew the flag of India because I knew I was Indian. And it's a very complicated flag if you haven't seen it, but it was tricky for this like little 7-year-old, you know what I mean? Um, so it was actually an experience where I had somebody in my close family who was suffering with a 25-year heroin addiction. I reached out to this organization in 20, I hope you don't mind the long story. I promise it ties
Oh,
up,
go
but
for it.
I reached out to this organization called the First Nations Health Authority to ask, we've tried everything Western medicine has to offer. Nothing works. Is there anything for an off-reserve Indigenous man to help with this heroin addiction? And they found him a place in this place called the Healing House in Chehalis. And he went to this healing house where all they did was live a traditional lifestyle, which my family has never had the enjoyment of experiencing. And he stayed sober and he got clean without a detox, without any Western medicine, just connecting to culture. That is it. And so I wrote this letter to them in 2004, and I said, I never knew culture could heal like this. And this is my family's first experience of being able to like be in the longhouse, be on community. And that was that was the initiation to our reconnection journey. And that was just in 2004. And so because of this letter, they published it. And then for years, they kept asking me to come work for them. But I worked with my husband at a race car team and I loved it. And I was like, I have a dream job. I'm not going anywhere. But they kept coming to me year after year after year. And finally, after 3 years of coming to me to come work for them, because it was a social justice initiative, like let's get Indigenous healthcare to equal value of non-Indigenous people. And so that was the mission of this organization. And so I was the 30th person that came in. And so a lot of my reconnecting has been through working with them. And I spent 10 years with them. The government ended up taking over and it's a full established health authority now. But those first 8 years was me, I was the lead organizer of like the elders gathering and the youth gathering and the Gathering Wisdom, which was our politically mandated meeting. And so I got to connect with the culture through that experience. And so I'm not someone who likes to capitalize on my Indigenous heritage. I do not feel like I am someone who can speak on behalf of it or teach it. I am very much a reconnecting Indigenous person, trying to recoup what we have lost. But I will say that the openness of the Indigenous community, I was so afraid because I don't have a college education and I was never qualified for the jobs I held there, that my reputation was so important to me that I never opened up about my mediumship. But when I did, my elder there, Elder Leonard George, was like, yeah, you're a spirit talker. That's what I do when I'm opening up and I'm praying for the food. And so it was really nice to have an elder there to help kind of put that Indigenous perspective onto what I was learning through spiritualism, which is primarily a British, it was born in New York, but it really flourished in England. It's a very English way of doing mediumship. So it was really nice to have that grounded Indigenous perspective for me. and learning how to like cleanse using natural resources that are around me, which was part of the indigenous teachings that they gave me. But I think that when it comes to spirit talking, it's us being spirits. It doesn't matter what nationality, what race. It's like we all have equal access to the spirit world and the world of energy. But it has been reconnecting and having some of those, teachings that has really kept me humble and kept me rooted into earth while I am connecting with the spirit world. You feel me on that? Like that's kind of the connection I have. So I'll be reconnecting for the rest of my life. And with this TV show coming, it's probably coming. I can't say it's coming for sure, but it's going to be another experience for me to continue to reconnect with the culture and, get that experience my grandmother never got to have,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the TV show, it's been filmed, correct?
The pilot has been filmed.
Well, the pilot has been filmed. Okay. And so it's still up in the air about when it's coming out and all of the details of that.
And even if it's coming out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I built Spirit School and then I got really burnt out. I closed my doors and I hid for a month in my office because I was like, I have nothing left in me. Like I can't do a reading. I can't teach anything right now. I was just like so exhausted. And then just one day, these two incredible indigenous women showed up at my door and like literally knocking on my door. And yeah, they were TV producers who have been sent out by a conglomerate of networks. They have some very successful Emmy award-winning shows already, and they basically said they sent us out to try to find Canada's top indigenous mediumship talent. And so they were considering quite a few of us, and I truthfully wasn't interested at first. I was trying to convince them not to pick me because I was like, they wanted me to like do ghosty stuff, and I'm like, look, I was a ghost hunter for years, but I'm more about the angels now and like healing, and it's been done on TV so many times. And I kept trying to like reject everything that they were like putting before me.
Yeah. Sounds like
And then in
you.
the end, it does sound like me. I was like, I don't even watch TV. I'm like, I do not even watch TV. We have one TV in the house. I never get it. If I watch Netflix, it's on my little phone. And so I'm just not a TV person. And so I kept trying to push it away, but they picked me anyway. So they're like, we picked you. So then we filmed this TV pilot, which was a huge undertaking. And I don't think I quite understood the gravity of the investment these people were putting in me until we started filming this TV pilot. And it took us 20 hours and 2 days to film a 12-minute pilot. And so I told you how I live my life, right? And so they said, yeah, if you get the TV show, it's going to be a 15 episode deal and it's going to be 5 days of filming per episode. And like they want to fly me to England. Like they wanted like there's no expense spared in this. It's kind of wild. And I definitely had like a moment of reckoning around the TV show stuff because, I still fight sometimes. Like I'm not the best medium in the world. Like I'm really not. I'm a very great teacher. And I'm definitely known for my teaching, but there's way more impressive mediums than me out there. And so there's this kind of like worthiness stuff that kind of came up that I had to work with on that. So I'm still always balancing with me and the manifestations because I can manifest anything. It's kind of scary. It's like I'm still in this kind of in between space if I want to meet this opportunity or not. But just yesterday, they reached out to me to extend my artist agreement because I'm in an agreement with them that I can't entertain any other ideas or offers until either a network says yay or nay. So like right now, they're just shopping around to the networks. We've heard back from APTN already, but I don't know where it will air, if it will happen. And I'm still kind of like in that in-between space. Like, is this what I really want? Because I've never really wanted to be famous and that's not what it's about. But if I built this school for other people to thrive, of course it's going to help the school. And when they approached me, it was funny because it was all about Spirit School. And I was like, yes, okay, perfect. Yeah, Spirit School, we can highlight my students. And then we filmed the pilot and they said, no, this is you. Like, this is Squamish Medium. So
Mhm.
that was a huge
They did the
identity
bait
crisis
and
in
switch.
itself. They switched. So now it's going to be called Squamish Medium. And then that was a harder thing for me to grasp because as much as it might look like I love the spotlight, I don't. I love creating one for other people to like thrive in. So yeah, it's been a journey. That's been a journey in itself. So it might happen, it might not happen, but you know what? experience has been really cool. And again, I never turn down an opportunity. So if it happens, that's spirit's way of saying, this is for you. So
Mhm.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it does seem divinely guided. You've been pushing it away so hard and it just keeps coming back. So, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's how come I have that quote, like spirit is my algorithm, spirit is my agent, because yeah, it's weird how my life has worked out.
So, tell us about Spirit School and what you have going on there with your retreats.
Yeah, so yeah, lots of retreats. So Spirit School is a sanctuary for light workers. I always say this is a place for light workers to land. They can let their guards down. You don't have to be anything here other than yourself. We start every class, hand on heart, accept yourself exactly as you come here today. I accept you exactly as you come here today, right? Like that acceptance is like such a big piece. But we have the school is online. So we have an online community, we have an online membership. It's off Meta, it's a slow platform. We're not fighting for people's dopamine there. It's a very intentional space. Got the membership, which is like online, and it's a development hub. I do my online masterminds, but then I opened up this physical school, which is where I do intensive retreats. So Spirit School is beautiful. It's on the ocean. It's overlooking the mountains. It's in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, if you ask me. And what I do here are 2 and 3 day intensive development retreats. So in July, I'll be doing the mystical path of mediumship. So it's going to be a 3 day or 2.5 day, I should say, intensive mediumship development experience. And in October, I'm going to be doing an angels and ancestors retreat because I love, like, angels came into my awareness through this mediumship path, and I love angels. So we're going to be doing an angel retreat here. Um, and then, we're going to have other teachers come in and do different workshops and stuff like that. But my primary focus is like in these kind of like deep and enriching, intensive experiences, because I can't do surface. So I can't just do like a 90-minute workshop. I'm like, we have to have a couple days here together. So that that's my focus here at Spirit School, but I'm trying to get some more healers in here to utilize the space as well so that it gets used, because I don't want to work like all that time. So that's Spirit School. It's a place to come land and develop and spiritually evolve. And much like you, even though you may not be interested in being a medium, the mediumship path is a very sacred one, and it leads you to a spiritual practice that I think is quite beautiful. So those are the types of experiences that I want to have here at Spirit School. And I also just have my Sacred Spirit Retreat, which is my biggest offering, which is a 5 day retreat in the woods of BC. It's not here at HQ. I rent a retreat center. And it always sells out every year. And it's usually my membership that eats up those spots, but they're like a 30-person retreat where I bring in light workers to like recharge. It's not like we're not developing, we're not working here. We're learning how to recharge using the natural resources of the land. And that's really what that retreat is about. And it's probably my most popular. And the next one's going to be June 2025 for that.
Beautiful. I've heard nothing but good things about that. Everyone absolutely loves it. Yes. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me today, Danielle. It's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you for having me. Awesome. Thank you.